I know what you're thinking. You caught the trailer for the new Exorcist movie. You said, oh, the guy from Stranger Things is in it. Oh, the actress from the previous Exorcist is in it. Oh boy, howdy. This should be good. Now, let's skip that and come see this instead.
Tenemos que encontrar a la bestia antes de que nazcan más. Los tiempos de la fe se terminan rápido.
And today we have, oh boy, When Evil Lurks. This review apparently might be controversial. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but before and then after I went to go see this, I kind of glanced at reviews. I didn't read anything, but I saw the overall consensus was that critics were in love and audiences, strangely enough, were not. So maybe I'll poke my head into a couple of those after this, but I want to give my unbiased opinion of what I thought of this movie when I first saw it. You know it's going to be a good one when he breaks out the Evil Dead shirt. This is going to be one of those horror movies, I think, this year where it's going to be very easy to fly under everybody's radar. I only saw it because my Instagram feed is tailored to me. I'm a geek who loves movies and especially like the horror genre, and here we are in October. I got a ad from Shudder, which I'm not sponsored or anything, but Shudder is a strictly horror-based streaming service. Everything from the good, really good stuff to the lower budget stuff. Shudder showed an ad and said, oh, it's going to be streaming on our service, and I bookmarked it off to the side, thinking nothing too much of it, like, oh, I'll get around to watching it. And then, out of nowhere, I saw that Regal, they had showings. So I thought, why not? Let's give it a go. If you don't know, When Evil Lurks is a Spanish horror film, so if you're an American like I am, it's technically a foreign horror film. Director is a Damien Runa, who I, shocker, hadn't heard the name, didn't know anything about this fine gentleman. He's been involved in film since like 2002, give or take. The last film he did before this was one called, I feel like I heard about this one somehow, Satanic Hispanics. I haven't seen it. I don't know if it's supposed to be a straight horror or comedy or a dark comedy horror, but that's the previous film he did. Aside from some short films, the first film he ever did was back in like 2007, a film called The Lost Getaway, but I'm familiar with none of this director's prior body of work. I'm already getting ahead of myself again, but I want to give a shout out to Ezequiel Rodriguez. Ezequiel Rodriguez, who played Pedro, he killed it in his role, and I'll get into why later. And his brother in this film, like not literal brother, but for the sake of the character. Damien Salomon, who played Jaime, as I learned, apparently you don't say Jimmy, it's Jaime. I learned that from Blue Beetle. I didn't know that was the pronunciation of that name in that language, but you're never too old to learn something. I want to get right into it. I know that when me and my friends went to go see this, we loved it. It was really great. This, When Evil Lurks, in my opinion, this is a horror movie. I know it sounds like a stupid thing to say, but this is what a horror film is. It's a horrific tale, but it's grounded, there's supernatural elements to it, but it's just, when there's like violence or gore, when there's horror or brutality, it's just, oh, it's brutal. This is a brutal watch. Without going into spoilers that are specific to characters, I will say animals die, dogs die, kids die. Like I wanted to preface this, and they don't die for no reason. There's clear narrative and thematic elements and reasons as to why people bite it in this film. But I do give that warning because I know some people have triggers and trigger warnings. So even if you are a horror fan, but you're not quite on board that kind of stuff, then just to warn you, this film has those moments several times. Go in as blind as possible, I will say that. I will only tell you as much as what the trailer showed me, which was like a vague idea of what was to be expected going into this, which is that it's a film about possession. You know, so we know there's going to be demons, religious connotation, it's going to be horror, potentially exorcisms, self-mutilation or violence against your peers and whatnot. And then what got me was, you know how critics will say, oh, yada yada yada, film of the year compared to this, or it does this with the genre. They pick some pretty good quotes that were just talking about how this kind of is not necessarily a brand new take on like the possession genre in horror, but it is like a kind of different spin on it, which I'm always here for, and just in general. Like in film, we're not looking to reinvent the wheel here, but I love to see concepts that we're familiar with taken in different directions. The acting is great. For our main stars especially, like the acting, there's a lot of emotion. Fear drives these characters, which is how I will address a con coming up down the list, but fear drives these characters for sure, and there's like sadness and regret, and of course that's what demons play on, right? So then you have characters struggling with their own baggage and morality and mortality, and all the characters were believable, even ancillary ones. Everybody from the kids to the adults, our main characters especially, they all did a paint-up job. It was great. And the practical effects, boy howdy. Not to say there aren't digital effects used throughout as well, but when it could be practical, whoa, was it practical. Direction is great, the camera work, practical effects, whether it's like, you know, a full bodysuit or whether it's somebody that had something very bad happen to them. And when they mix in digital moments, or they have to have like certain cuts in the film, it's hardly noticeable. The effects in this are great. I will warn you though, they are brutal and they are gory. Like, again, it all serves the narrative and the brutality of this horror film, but I just will warn you, there is definitely violence and there's definitely gore. And I like the narrative. We all did when we went to go see it. I personally enjoyed the story this movie told, and funny enough, the world building, it never spoon feeds you the exposition. It lets you figure things out based on what the conversations the characters have, the arguments they have as things transpire, how they react to it, and overall just kind of the state of the world in this film kind of gives you all the narrative. Like you can extrapolate from it and figure it all out. The story, while very dark and admittedly bleak, it was a great story. It was brutally simplistic in its premise, and yet with the demonic possession side of things adds another layer of like psychological and emotional complexity that it wouldn't have otherwise had. The way that this film approaches possession and demonic forces and all that is very grounded. I almost want to say realistic. It's not the whole someone's possessed and immediately they're like, it's almost like The Thing. You often find yourself in this film asking, wait, are they possessed? Who's possessed? Like, hang on a second. Well, that person's definitely possessed, but wait, hang on. Who's safe? Sometimes the audience is given visual cues and you're able to pick up on that. But there are a few moments in the film where I'm like, I don't like how that person answered that question, or it leaves so much room for doubt and for questioning, which adds to the paranoia and fear felt by our main cast of characters. The only negatives that I could possibly think of when I was like going over my review for this film, and I'll admit that it's not perfect, but it's damn near close to it in my opinion. First act is, I hesitate to use this term, but slow burn, but I think it's to help establish our characters and slowly build the tension and the world. Like, the first act is still good, but out of the movie as a whole, it might be the weakest, just only slightly, and it's only slightly noticeable that it's like, oh, we're slowly building up, you know, we get the pot slowly going up to a boil, and then from the end of Act 1, and then obviously 2 and 3, the movie just goes and goes and goes, and is in my opinion, very well paced. But if I had to like really nitpick here, then admittedly the first act is kind of slow burn-ish, but not necessarily in a bad way, just in a way that prevents it from being perfectly paced. I can already see a lot of people complaining about, and normally I would also complain about it in movies. Admittedly, a con of the film is character decisions and like what people do. Now sometimes you see a horror movie and there's the obvious idiots where it's like, why would you do that? Why would you go here?
Don't go in there!
Why would you not take that with you? Why would you believe a word this thing says? Yada, yada, yada. You get my point. In films that I enjoy, I can write it off as, oh, the character, you know, humans, we're emotional, we're flawed. So if you're scared and you're panicky, you're not going to be thinking straight. You're not going to be firing on all cylinders, you know? And in this movie, I think, especially for our two main characters, really every character we encounter that makes a questionable decision, if and when they do, it's driven out of fear. Usually it's driven either because there's a possession involved, and obviously they're going to be making weird homicidal decisions. But for our main characters, like, if you're wondering why would he do this or why would she do that, again, it's fear. Fear is like a driving, for lack of a better term, motivational factor for characters and their agencies in this film. So on one hand, Characters do make silly choices and make weird calls sometimes in the film, but it's because either due to lack of knowledge, which, you know, sometimes how could they have known, or it's emotionally driven, like out of fear, sadness, anger especially, and that's kind of excusable to me. Like, again, for the sake of the characters, it makes sense, you know? I think the main thing that would turn audiences off, because some films that do this can get away with it and some films somehow don't scrape by the same way. The film is a horror film, and I'm not going to say how it ends, but I mean, how do most horror films end? It's usually depressing or bleak or maybe not the happiest of endings, and for me, that's okay, that's fine. Everybody loved it when Talk to Me did it. Again, funny enough, a possession film, but it's cyclical in nature, and it ends on, in my opinion, an appropriate downer. It's a horror film, that's the point. Like, it's a slasher film, sure, you have the final girl, you have a survivor, maybe you can best the evil by the end, but in my opinion, like, if you're reading a horror tale or watching like a horrific movie or something, I mean, usually that's what it is. It's a horrific tale. That's the horror of it. It's not gonna have sunshine and rainbows, and characters aren't gonna be like better for the wear after it. Take that for what you will, and I can see why people wouldn't like it. The suspense is killing me. I gotta find out what some people said. Audience scored fewer than 50, but it's at 57%. Now, I haven't watched any reviews online, but let me just look up like at least one negative review. I'm so curious. The the high reviews that I see, yeah, there's high, it's like 5, 5, 5. There's a paragraph here, paragraph there. One person put 1 star and said, I fell asleep 3 times, so I'm sorry you weren't watching, I don't know, The Meg 2. Funny enough, most of these reviews are all positive. It's like the one negative that brought the average down. What the? I think most horror fans have been enjoying it so far. I love the film. Like, it was, like I said, it's not perfect, but it's damn close to it. This is what we need. It's a horror film. Look, I'm getting excited now. At the end of the day, When Evil Lurks is a Spanish horror film that pulls absolutely no punches. It is brutal. It is visceral. It is oftentimes difficult to watch, but it's also, for a possession film with demons, it is remarkably grounded. For a budget that I can only assume is on the lower end of the spectrum, it is shot well. It just looks like a movie. It doesn't look like a fan-made anything. When it's of good quality. The love that went into this, the care, the attention, the practical effects, the acting, the horror of the movie. I got close to squirming a few times, and it takes a lot for me to do that. There are horrific visuals in this film that will stay with me for the rest of this year and potentially the rest of my life. It's so nice when a horror film comes out, and nowadays with Hollywood, getting on my soapbox here, it's like The Exorcist, yeah, demons, scares, marketing, how can we sell this to you? And I assume that after it's done with theaters, it'll only be available to stream on Shudder, so definitely, if you don't get a chance to watch it in theaters, watch it on Shudder. If you are a horror fan and you're open to whatever they're gonna throw at you, you are gonna probably love this as much as I will. It's survival horror with demons mixed in, and there's plenty of moments where they're building up these characters so that you care about them one way or the other. They're building up the world by establishing like lore, surprisingly, and giving you backstory and certain little notes here and there. There's performances, there's set pieces. The director lets everything in this film breathe for the appropriate amount of time, so just almost everything in the film lands. I'll stop rambling. When Evil Lurks, easily a high 4 out of 5 for me. A high 4 out of 5 for me, and a great addition for the October lineup if you're looking for a good, solid horror film to watch this October, this year, just in general. Like, it's just really good. I don't know what else to tell you about it. That's all I gotta say about When Evil Lurks. Thank you guys and gals so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie I review next. And goodbye, travelers.